Hi everyone, thank you for joining today. Is it possible? We're just going to wait for a minute or so for everyone to join us and then we will kickstart the session. Okay, let's get started. As I said, welcome. I am Verity. I'm your host for today, and I'm also Senior Product Marketing Manager for ScriptRunner for Jira on-premise. So today, Is It Possible is about on-premise. It's episode 4, and we're excited to have you join us today. Next slide. So I just want to introduce you to the rest of our panelists today. We have Tiffany, who's our software engineer for ScriptRunner for Confluence. We have Nandish, who's our engineering team lead for ScriptRunner for Bitbucket. We have Javier, who's our senior software engineer for ScriptRunner for Jira, and hanging out in the chat, answering some questions will be Matthew Clark, who's our software engineer for ScriptRunner for Jira. And we also have Jess, who is our producer for today's session, but she will also be hanging out and answering some questions. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping for today. So everyone is on mute, so please do use the chat function. Don't direct message anyone on the panel because we won't be able to see your questions, but just drop the questions in the chat. And as I said, we've got some people behind the scenes who will answer them as best as we can. And also, if you do have a question for us for a future session, please do drop it on the official Is It Possible forms, and we'll aim to answer them hopefully in the upcoming Is It Possible. And we will also follow today's session with a recording. So let's get started. And we're going to start off, as I said, with Nandish, who's going to give us a demonstration on new built-in scripts for Bitbucket. So over to you, Nandish.
Thanks, Verity. Hi, this is my first time on Is It Possible? So I'm the engineering team lead for ScriptRunner for Bitbucket, and I will take you through a new feature that we have in ScriptRunner for Bitbucket that is around blueprints. So if blueprints is like a collection of configurations in ScriptRunner, so one of our first built-in scripts or blueprints is around getting started. So it's aimed at somebody who is new to ScriptRunner and doesn't really know what can they get out of ScriptRunner, or somebody who has been using ScriptRunner for a while, but they haven't really explored the benefits of using ScriptRunner. They can use this built-in script to get them started and with some of the features that will be useful to their projects and repositories. So if you navigate to built-in scripts, we have this new built-in script here, which is blueprint, getting started. You can add a node. So it is basically a collection of configurations. So it helps you create those configurations. And for that, you can provide a note to say this was created for a specific reason or something. If you don't add, it will basically add a default note. For the configurations, what we have is you can have the configurations in either a disabled or an enabled mode. So in a disabled mode, it allows you to, go to those configurations, the newly created configurations, and modify them to your needs before enabling them. This helps when you are making changes directly to your live environments and you don't want to affect any of the existing configurations that you might have. So I will create this in disabled for now. Then you have a bunch of fields that you need to fill in. So the configurations will basically be created for the fields that you fill in. So if you leave them empty, the configurations will not be created. So there are some global configurations and there are some project or repository specific configurations. Globals, and this is just a selection of some of the configurations that are widely used. You can, however, check out any of the other configurations in any of the other tabs here as well. For example, if you want to enforce, let's say, naming patterns or repository patterns, you can fill in this here. You can select what you want these configurations to be applied for. If you're not sure, you can select a target project or a specific repository you want these configurations to be created for. Let's say I will create this for one of the repositories I have. Then you have options to enforce on your projects or repositories. So for example, I don't want anybody force pushing to any changes to the repository. So I'll say reject force push. There is an option to automatically delete or automatically check the checkbox when you merge the pull request. This will help you create that configuration that does it for you. There are other options as well. I'll just fill in. You can play around these options. And I'll create something for that store as well. And when I click on create configurations, it will say that the configurations were created in a disabled state. I can go back to each of these configurations and see what the configuration was. So it's already added a note. It's applied to this project, repository, and the maximum size I set was 10,000. So it's checked that. Now you can also add any conditions that you want around here before enabling it. So you can go to, this is not yet enabled. So if you look at it, this is all in a disabled state. So for each of the configurations that we created as part of this, you can still go in and modify them before enabling. So you can provide conditions, or there may be other things that you might need to do so. Or you can use them out of the box as they were created if you don't have any specific conditions or anything that you would like to add. And once you are happy with the configuration, you can enable and start using them. So this was blueprints. This is one of our blueprints. There will be more in the future, which may be targeted towards, let's say, a merge check or pre-hooks, or specifically towards post hooks, and it will be a combination of a number of configurations that will allow you to configure projects quickly and conveniently. I hope this will be useful, and I encourage everyone to use this feature. Thank you. What do you, Verity, or if there aren't questions?
Thank you very much, Nandish. Okay. So thank you very much. That was great. And we're really excited for our next demonstration from Tiffany, who is going to talk about changes to CQL for Confluence. So over to you, Tiffany.
All right. Thank you. So let me share my screen here. So yeah, basically what I'm going to show you today is something that's pretty exciting, in my opinion. I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek of our new feature for enhanced search, CQL autocomplete. This will be a pretty quick demo, but it's a super powerful feature. So we developed this to make it a lot easier to construct CQL queries. So I'll just show you a couple queries where this is particularly useful. And the first one that I'm going to show you is a query that will return pages that have a particular macro on them. So this could be useful if you're doing an audit for migrating to cloud and want to know which pages have a particular macro for that purpose. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to look for the type page. So you can see that brings that up for me. Even just like starting off, I have all these options and I can select type from here. I type T, it gives me these options. That's pretty cool. And I want to do type equals. And because I'm looking for type, it knows to give me or suggest to me different types. So I'm going to select page and macro equals the info macro. I'll just pick that one for this particular purpose. So then, as you can see, I was able to almost completely build that query just from the suggestions that I was given. So let's see. Also, if I go back and let's say that I type title equals, it'll give me suggestions that are different because it knows that I want different titles. So it's contextual in that way, which is really cool. But I'll also show you another query. This one is going to be a little longer. So this one is going to be to find all blog posts in a particular space that were created last month. So to start off, I want a particular space. So I'll do space equals, and then it will give me different space keys as options, or also the current space. You can also do that, which is like pretty nice. Lots of different suggestions. And we'll do and type equals blog post and created greater than start of month. And we'll want to do -1 month so that I can get the start of the last month. And created less than start of month. So that gets me the start of this month. And then I don't have any like blog posts on this instance that were created last month, but you can see that, you know, this is a pretty long query. And I was also able to construct this almost entirely out of just suggestions, which I think is pretty cool. Also, if your syntax is wrong, you'll get this little symbol that, and a little message that says, you know, could not parse SQL and stuff like that. And then as you could see, whenever your syntax is right, you get a little check and you know. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
So thank you. Very exciting. Right, let's carry on. So time for questions. So our first question is from Michael. And Michael would like to know, how does one hide the ability for project admins to add individual users to a project/repo? They should only be allowed to add groups. So I think, are you answering this one, Nandish?
Yes, I will.
Okay, over to you.
Yeah, so generally, I think if you look at the screen for where you can assign the users and or update the permissions for a specific user, it is this screen where you have add user or group button. When you click on it, it gives you a list of the users that you can search for, and also it shows you the groups that you have. You select them and you say, you know, grant them this access, and off you go. So the question, I believe, is that you want to not allow project admins to update the permissions, but the project admins can add groups, but not individual users like we did here. I'll just remove this user from here. I think instead of hiding or this button, because we want the ability to you know, grant access or update the permissions of a group. If you just hide this button, you don't have anywhere else to update this. Instead of hiding, a more appropriate action here would be to listen for an event that you know, assigns the permissions and cancel it, and that would allow us to display the right message to the project admins to let them know that they are not allowed to update permissions for a user, but they can update the permissions for a group. And it is useful for a number of other reasons as well. For example, if you just hide certain features from the UI, it does not allow the users to action it from the UI itself, but they can always go and, update those through the REST endpoints and other mechanisms. So I will show you what I have. So for example, for project A, let's see who we have. So we can soon see that user 1 is the project admin. So I will quickly switch to this user using our switch user functionality. So I'm now impersonating user 1. And if I navigate to project A, I have the ability to, currently assign a users or groups to it. So if I, let's say, want to assign user 2, I was able to add user 2. Now the question here is that I don't want this user, the user 1, who is just a project admin, he's not a system admin, to update the or grant access to the users, but he should be able to access or grant access to the groups. So I'll return to my session as an administrator. What I've done is I've created a simple listener. So I will just enable this and I will show you what it has. So this applies to all the projects. You can, however, select any projects that you would like this restriction to be applied to. I have applied it on a number of events. So there are events such as project permission grant requested. We are also looking for any modifications. So if there was a read permission, you want to revoke or update the permission to write or something, or revoke the permissions for a user or something. This event will be fired whenever project permissions are updated. And then we have similar ones for repository as well. You can select all this, or you can only have project permission events there. I have selected repository as well because I would want to see a similar kind of enforcement across projects and repositories. And here is a simple snippet that would help us achieve this. So we're getting a user manager to see whether the user is an admin or not, and we will see if the event is affecting a user, and if it's affecting a user, then I'll just cancel it with a message saying project admins can only update permissions for groups, and you can contact your system administrator to update permissions of individual users. Simple snippet, nothing fancy. This is just checking if the event affects a user, and this is just checking if the user who is updating is an admin or not. So with this listener enabled, if I now go to the switch user and impersonate this project admin again, I go back to the project permissions, and I try to add a user, then I will get this message saying the permission grant was cancelled, and the message that we put in the listener will be displayed to whoever is updating or willing to update. We will get a similar message when, let's say, you want to remove this, because we are listening for revocation as well. So you get the same message here as well. And if you try to edit it from admin to, you will get the same message here as well. And the question was that they should only be able to assign it to groups. So for example, I want to assign or update permissions for this group. I can say I want stash users to have write permissions, add, and I can update or modify permissions for groups, but not individual users. I think this is it. If there are any questions, I would be happy to answer. But normally, if you want to restrict certain functionality, a better way is just to listen to the events and cancel those instead of hiding certain UI elements.
That's great. Thank you, Nandish. And thank you, Michael, for your question. Okay, so go on to the next question. So our next question is, we have two different spaces, draft and publish. Once the workflow of draft space is completed, the page is published in published spaces, and I'm trying to create a listener to update that list each time a page is published. And that question is from Aurora. And Tiffany, I believe you're answering this one.
Yes, I am.
Let's go for it.
So let me share my screen with you guys again. And so yeah, basically, to demonstrate this, I have this page in a draft space that I'm going to be moving to the publish space. And then I have this page in the publish space of a running list of pages that have been published or moved to the publish space from the draft space. And so, yeah, I'll show you how we can make this happen, and I'll demonstrate, move this page over, and it will be added to this running list of pages. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a custom listener. And we're going to do this on the page move event. And so then I have my script here. And I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm not going to explain this in like super crazy detail, but I will just do kind of a high level overview of, a couple of things that I think are like notable or like worth discussing in a little more detail. So basically the thing that I'm doing here is that I'm checking to make sure that the page has in fact actually been moved from the draft space and to the publish space, to ensure that this isn't just running every time that a page moves just anywhere. It has to specifically be from the draft space to the publish space. And then here I'm using JSoup to build the list item containing the link to the page that was moved. And this is what we're all ultimately going to add to the page with the list of all the published pages. And so this is all just me getting the particular page that has the list of all the pages. And then let's see. Oh yeah, and then once we get that page, we use JSoup to parse the body content. And so basically, yeah, we'll get the page's body from here, and then we get a document object from that by parsing with JSoup. And then also here, what I'm checking is basically like, so that the script will work whether you already have a running list or not. I'm checking to see if there is already an ordered list on the page. And then if there's not, we'll add one. So then finally, we append this list item as a child to the ordered list element. And then we save our changes. So let's see now a little again. Oops. So yeah, I'll go ahead and save that. So we have that, and then I will go back to this page. I'll move it to the publish space. And we can see that this page has been added to this page. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you, Aurora, for your question. Great. Let's move on to the next question. Our next question is from Michael again, just because you're giving us such good questions. Any examples on how to create a script/template for repository creation? I would like to add 2 files when a repository is created, for example, and apply default settings. And Nandish, I think, are you answering this one?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
So just give me a second. Okay. Right. So I think this is a really good question, Michael. Normally, you would have, I'll return to my access as an administrator. Normally, you would have a requirement that when you create a repository, you might want to add a license file or probably a README file or some sort of starter guide as to what you want to do with the setup of or how you would go about setting up a repository or something. And Bitbucket, at least the on-premise version, the data center versions, don't allow you to create files when you create a repository. The good news is that you can do it using ScriptRunner, and I'll show you how. For adding files to any of the repositories, the first thing is that you would have to, you can't just add files to any Git repository because it has to have a commit history as to who committed it and everything. The general flow would be that you check out a repository, by cloning it, adding files, and then committing those files over to, so that it has the author who committed the file and the changes that go with it. But it is possible to do it using a script or to automate the process of cloning or checking out a repository and pushing commits too. So on the server, what you want is basically create a work tree and then follow the normal process of adding a file, committing, and then pushing it so that it's there when you create a repository. I have created, because it was it is a bit complex, but because it was complex, I've created a pre-built script for it, and I think I've applied it to all the projects. So when you create a repository in any of these projects, this should take effect. But the script looks something like this. We have something called as Git work tree builder factory. As I said, we need a work tree, and Bitbucket currently has this class which allows you to create a temporary work tree and then act on it or work on it. So you can use it to add certain things to it. We are using repository service because when the event is fired, because we are looking at repository created event, we don't have the default branch names, branch name that was created from the event. So we have to fetch it from the repository. So we go and fetch the default branch name using this service for that, because when you create a new repository, you're asked what the default branch should be, and you should push your changes to that default branch because that will be your main branch or whatever the name of that branch is. And what we are doing here is we are adding a README file and using this worktree.publish function to publish it, specifying the author and the branch. So this is the default branch, and just calling build on this, just publishing these changes. So this is the class that helps you build those parameters, and what it accepts is an invoker. The invoker is simple. You just need to implement something here, which is invoked on pre-update and post-update. Because we are not doing anything here, it's just a simple case of accepting all the updates, and post-updates we do nothing. And in this one, in this method add readme, I'm just creating a file readme, writing some content to it. So this is a readme file, so I'm just adding the title of the repository name to that readme file, adding that file, and then committing that file with the author. The author is the one who created the repository, and the message, the commit message that you want to go with it. You can add a number of files with this. I've just demonstrated you can add, demonstrated this with one file, but you can add as many files. Or for example, if you wanted to add license files, or if you wanted to, let's say for specific projects that are open source, you want to add open source licenses, or for specific projects that are closed, so you want to add some different sort of license, you can probably put in if conditions here to put any files that you want in here. But you get the flow, right? You create a temporary work tree, and you do the normal process of adding it, committing it, and then publishing that work tree using this builder factory. So I have enabled this, and I'll show you. I will show this in action. So, for example, project A, I create a new repository, let's say some repo, and default branch name is, let's say, develop. And if I create a repository, it shows you this screen, but you can just ignore it. And if you refresh it, you should see that the file was added when you created the repository. So it's added the README file, and it's added this some repo because we put this value in there. If you look at the commit, it was committed by administrator, means the one who created the repository, and this has also added the commit message in here. So this is about how you can add, files when creating new repositories. I think an extension or as part of this question, there was another question, which was like something around default settings. Like it is too broad when we talk about settings, because I'm not sure what settings or repository settings we are talking about. So when you create a repo, you want to, take all those default settings as well with you when you create a repo, or use something as a template so that all my repositories get the same setting. So in Bitbucket or in ScriptRunner for Bitbucket, we have another built-in script, which is clone repository configuration. So I have a project here, let's say a template repo. And if I look at the settings, I can see some of the permissions. So this has user one has the right permissions on it. If I look at merge checks, it has some merge checks configured. For example, this has the number of approvals set to 2. You have some ScriptRunner configurations as well. For example, pre-hook, I have one pre-hook for restrict file size. If I edit it, I can see that it's set to 10,000. Okay. Now, using this built-in script, clone repository configuration, I can select this template repo. I can select the target project in which I want to create the new repository. So instead of creating the repository using the create new button or create repository button that you have in the projects, use this script to clone a specific repository, and it will not clone the source code for that repository, but it will clone the settings or general settings for this repository. So I'll create, I'll give it a name, let's say clone repo, and it will then create the clone repo for me. Now, because I had the hook enabled, which added files to newly created repositories, I already have a README file with me. And if you look at the settings for this new repository, then if I go to, for example, any of the ScriptRunner features, then it already has restrict file size, and its size is set to 10,000. I can check the mod checks for the built-in configurations from Bitbucket, and there too I have this, and it's correctly set. Can also check the permissions, and you can see that it has user one already added. So it's replicated all the settings, some template repository that you want to use as a template for settings or something, and created another repository. I hope this answers your question, and I would be willing to help if there are any more questions on this. That's me.
Thank you, Nandish. Great demo. Thank you very much. And it's really been exciting to see more Confluence and Bitbucket questions coming through. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Right, our last question, and this one's from Hal. And Hal would like to know, is it possible to schedule a job that runs a JQL and save the results in an Excel or CSV file and then send it via email? And Javier, I think you're going to be answering this one, so over to you.
Sure, I can answer this one. So thank you, Howard, for your question. Yes, it is possible to achieve that with a ScriptRunner job, at least in CSV format. I'm actually not sure about the Excel files, but I think the CSV format may be easier to process in a script, and since it is essentially plain text, and it probably has better compatibility across different spreadsheet tools and different platforms. So that is the format that we are going to use in this demonstration. I will share my screen. All right. So here we have a configured job. And if we edit the configuration, well, it's already in place, but here we have first of all, we need to set an appropriate frequency for the job execution. In this case, and for this demonstration, we are making it to be executed every 5 minutes, but realistically, the frequency could be on a weekly basis. For instance, we could generate a report every week. So let me go through this script. The first thing that we would need to do would be to generate a jQuery query in the same way that we would do in the issue search page. For instance, here we would be querying for the medium, high, or highest priority issues in the test project. So we are doing the same thing here. Let me expand this. And we are using the issues.search method from the Happy API that ScriptRunner provides out of the box, and we don't need any additional import for that. And we also need to generate a temporary file to store the results from the jQuery query. And the first thing that we need to do with that file is append the header. In this header, we are going to add the fields that we are interested in, which will be the issue key, the status, the priority, assignee, and the summary in this case. We would also need to manually add a line break here. And after the header is set, we just go through each one of the issues, and we must declare the issues in the same order here. Key name, no, key, sorry, key, status, priority, assignee, and summary. And then we would store that value in the cell for the CSV table, separated by a comma, which is the standard separator for CSV files. And at the end of the line, we must introduce another line break. So after all these lines have been processed, all that is left to do is trying to send the mail. This mail.send method is another utility from the Happy API. And we need to set the recipient, the subject, and the body of the message. And most importantly, the CSV attachment that we generated earlier. And then finally, after the mail has been sent, we can already delete the temporary file as we don't need it anymore. So we are also assuming that the mail server configuration is already in place in the Jira instance. So for this demonstration, I just have a local mail server to verify that the mails are being sent correctly on a regular basis. And here we have the mails that are being sent every 5 minutes. Let's just try to open the latest one. Here we have the body of the message. And if we go to this tab and try to download the CSV attachment, hopefully we will see the table with the generated data. Here we have the key, status, priority, assignee, and summary. Of course, this is a simple example. We can always add more text fields, such as the issue description and so on, but this was just to demonstrate that it is possible to achieve this with a ScriptRunner job. And yeah, that would be all, I think. So I hope this was useful, and thank you for your question.
Perfect. Thank you, Javier, and thank you, Mel. So we're almost at the end. Had some fantastic questions. So I just wanted to remind everyone how you can keep in touch and get involved. We have the product updates hubs for Jira and Confluence, where you can read about what we've recently released and what we're working on. Don't forget, you can share your ScriptRunner story with us. So if you solved a tricky problem or built something really cool that you want to tell us about it, we'd love to hear. And there's also paid research opportunities where you can have your feedback heard and get involved in shaping ScriptRunner. And last but not least, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank our panelists. So Nandish, Tiffany, Javier, and all those behind the scenes. It's been great to have you with us, and it's been a great session. If you have a question that you would like to ask the team and have answered at a future Is It Possible, remember to submit them, and keep an eye out in your inbox for a recording of this webinar where you can relive the session again. So thanks everyone, great to have you with us today, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.